A lot of people say they don't like grackles, but they're some of my favorite birds. I first found out about grackles by their sound. I heard one sounded like a bunch of rusty screen doors screeching away right outside my house. And when I went out to see what the heck that was, there were about 10 blackbirds with iridescent heads hanging around on my land. And that is how I first met the common grackle. I expected to not like common grackles because they're loud, and usually I don't like loud, screechy birds. However, as I watched them, I realized they were quite fun to observe. They're gregarious and bold. They like to jostle with each other when they're in flock formation, and they're just exciting to see. They also don't give me the feeling that they're going to dive bomb me, unlike some other large and loud birds. I have since read that not all grackles are so peaceful toward people, so maybe I was lucky to have ones that were cool with me. Appearance. At first glance, common grackles seem to be plain black birds. They're a bit smaller than crows, and they're bigger than robins. Someone who isn't observant might find their appearance unremarkable. However, a closer look in the right light will reveal that they have a bluish iridescent head. At least the males do. It turns out this isn't caused by pigment in the feathers. Instead, it's the result of microscopic structures within those feathers, and those produce the shimmering metallic effect. This appearance is more pronounced in some types of lighting. It's also more obvious in the healthier, shinier birds. Females, however, are typically plain black and a bit slimmer than the boys. This cool metallic look on the males is another thing that makes me appreciate grackles. Songbirds come in all kinds of colors, but most of them do not have a metallic shine anywhere on their bodies like grackles do. Flock sizes. At first, the flock that came to my property up in Michigan wasn't all that big, maybe 10 or 20 birds. However, as the years went on, the flock grew each spring. Eventually, over 100 would come onto my property, all of them looking for my black oil sunflower seeds. I happily provided the seeds because I wanted giant flocks of grackles to come in. It was quite a sight, and I always knew spring had arrived when I'd hear those rusty screen doors start up. Also, I found that after a week or two they would become less loud, and then they were definitely more fun to have around. After a few weeks they would pair off and set up their nests in more dispersed locations. At that point there was no longer a flock, and things got back to normal around the feeders. They wouldn't group up again until the fall, when they were ready to head out. One notable thing about the flocks is that they often contained a few red-winged blackbirds. They not only tolerated the blackbirds, but seemed to get along with them as if they were just more grackles. I've read that they're willing to group up with all kinds of blackbirds that are of basically similar size as themselves. It was like finding a prize to see a red-winged blackbird flash his red shoulders when nobody else around had them. Feeding. One of the reasons people don't like to see grackles coming to their feeders is that they will hog the feeders. The solution to this is to set up multiple feeders. Use one with a wide perch for the grackles. If they can get to it and land on the perch, they will take that as their own property. Pretty much no other bird is going to get into that feeder as long as the flock of grackles is still in flock formation. However, that doesn't mean you have to give up feeding the nicer sounding, smaller songbirds that a lot of people favor. What you need to do is set up other feeders that grackles cannot fit on. I found that tube feeders that have perches are best for attracting and successfully feeding songbirds. These look almost like finch feeders, but instead of having no perches, they have little short perches. Birds like cardinals can use these, and grackles are too big to be able to get their feet onto these tiny perches. Then if you want goldfinches and chickadees, set up a Niger thistle feeder for them. Since finches and chickadees can cling onto a feeder, get feeders that have no perches at all for them, just gratings for them to hang onto. Keep each feeder about 20 feet away from all other types of feeders. This gives each kind of bird plenty of space for itself, and leaves plenty of room in the middle for the big grackle flock to fit in there. Put the grackle feeder in the center and the other feeders to each side. When the grackle flock is at its biggest, the other birds probably won't want to come too close. However, they don't stay in flock formation all that long. Pretty soon the grackles will start to thin out, and there'll be no competition for the other feeders. In fact, there'll be no competition for the Niger feeder at all, and you'll find that goldfinches and chickadees can come in at all times of the year with no interference from the larger birds. Of course, it can take a couple of weeks for the other birds to realize that they really can't use the Niger feeder, and that's when they lose interest in it. Until then, newly arrived grackles may try to hog it, but they'll quickly learn that there's no point and leave the finches alone. One thing to note is that even though the Cornell Lab of Ornithology lists them as ground feeders, they are quite willing and eager to eat from regular bird feeders that are big enough for them. They only eat off the ground after they've cleared out the feeder above it. Of course, since they can't all fit on the feeder at once, a lot of them do end up looking for seeds on the ground rather than miss out completely. Also, like many bird species, they prefer a feeder with just black oil sunflower seeds. Any other kind of seed is likely to be tossed aside. Those tossed seeds will end up on the ground, but they'll just stay there, ignored. In the wild, common grackles actually eat a lot of acorns. They even have a specialized structure in their beaks to cut acorns open and eat them. However, if there are sunflower seeds around, they certainly won't bother with acorns. It's interesting, though, to know what they do when they don't win the territory that has the feeder. Another thing they eat, which makes them the enemies of some farmers, is corn. It's said that they can decimate a cornfield thanks to their large flock numbers and ravenous appetites. However, there's no reason I can think of for a regular homeowner to dislike these birds. Behaviors. Since grackles are very bold with each other, some people may fear being attacked. I've found that there's no need to worry about this. While they'll challenge each other constantly, and that provides great visual entertainment to see, they are completely non-aggressive to humans, at least in my experience. Some do report different results. Unlike blue jays and some other larger birds, the grackles always responded to me with respect and non-hostility. That said, one of the most fun things about watching a grackle flock is observing them trying to one-up each other, intimidate each other, and basically jockey for social position within the group. The ones who obtain dominant positions will attract the strongest and most fit females. They also get the best territories. Typically, one or two grackle pairs would manage to win the territory that had the feeder in it. This territory is the prize area that they all want. That's because whoever manages to take that particular territory will have an easy source of food for their fledglings and for themselves. Like most birds, grackles feed their young insects while they're still in the nest, and when they first get out of the nest. However, as time goes on and the fledglings get large enough, the youngsters will enjoy the use of the feeders just like their parents until it's time for them to group up with the other grackles and go south. One behavior that had always struck me as strange is that they would go to a particular spot on the lawn, hunker down, and spread out their wings. It looks almost like something's wrong with the bird that's doing this. Imagine my amazement when I found out just now that this behavior is called anting. What they were doing was standing on an anthill and letting the ants crawl all over them. That makes me cringe. Just the thought of having ants all over me makes my skin crawl. Yet grackles do this on purpose, and apparently so do a lot of other bird species. This is believed to help get rid of parasites from their feathers and off their skin. The ants spray formic acid in response to what they perceive as an attack. The formic acid gets rid of parasites. When there are no ants available, common grackles will use substitutes that they find. Anything from lemons to mothballs, anything that's obnoxious to bird parasites will be used. However, they prefer ants. And sure enough, now that I think of it, the place I saw them doing that was exactly where a carpenter anthill was on that land. Range. It turns out that grackles don't always migrate. In the south, they often stay in the same general area year-round. However, when I had grackle flocks visiting my land, I was up in Michigan. That put me right at the southern end of the areas that they bother to migrate from. That meant that every year an ever-growing flock would come bombing in the spring, and they would all leave in a gang in the fall. Now I'm in Florida, and Cornell says they stay down here year-round, though I'm sure some come from the north. Alas, I can't put bird feeders up here because I'm in bear country. Putting a bird feeder up in bear country means you end up feeding bears and not birds, and feeding bears is a bad idea. One surprising fact that I didn't expect to see when researching for this video is that grackles are considered to be in steep decline. Between 1966 and 2019, it is estimated that they have lost 2% of their population per year. That adds up to about a 54% decline since their 1966 numbers. That makes it so that by putting up grackle-friendly feeders where possible, you could be making a notably positive influence on this species' numbers. Click the link in the description to get this mug. It features a common grackle in all of his glory. Subscribe to see more videos about the birds found in North America.